Komið sælir áhundu góðir. Hér í Veröld, húsi Vigdísar Finnbogadóttur, var nýverið haldin daglöng ráðstefna verndarsvæði og þróun byggðar. Í þessum þætti ætlum við að fara yfir nokkur merkileg erindi sem voru flutt á þessari ráðstefnu. En hver var tilgangur með því að halda málþing af þessu tagi? Sigurður Gísli Pálmason verslunarmaður, sem stóð að ráðstefnunni, vildi með henni opna glugga út í heim. Fræðast það hvernig aðrar þjóðir hagnýta náttúrugæði sín og menningararf. Opna glugga, fanga nýjar hugmyndir. Við skulum byrja á því að bera niður í inngangserindi Sigurðar sjálfs.
Tilgangurinn með þessari ráðstefnu er að opna glugga út í heim til að hleypa inn ferskum vindum og nýjum hugmyndum. Við ætlum að fræðast það hvernig aðrar þjóðir fara að við það að hagnýta náttúrugæði og menningararf á verndarsvæðum. Við ætlum að fræðast hvernig farið er að því að tryggja vernd umhverfisins samhliða þróun byggðar og atvinnulífs sem tengist hinu verndaða. Við Íslendingar erum skammt á veg komin í þessum efnum, en miðað við reynslu annarra þjóða væri það til heilla að stíga skrefið til fulls. Við höfum fengið, eins og ég sagði áðan, 6 erlenda fyrirlesara sem munu miðla af þekkingu sinni. Þau munu koma með dæmi hvaða leiðir hægt er að fara til að skapa lífsviðurværi og stuðla að byggðaþróun með sterkri tengingu við verndarsvæði. Okkar þjóð á ríkan menningararf og meiri náttúru auðæfi en flestar. Við getum virkjað þessi verðmæti í sátt við umhverfið og okkur ber að skoða möguleikana til hlítar. Bob Dylan söng fyrir rúmlega 50 árum, þá 24 ára gamall, Times they are changing, og hann hafði rétt fyrir sér. Tímarnir breytast hraðar nú en nokkru sinni fyrir. Tíminn hefur þjappast saman, allt gerist hraðar. Við höfum upplifað MeToo og hingað og ekki lengra og það segir manni hversu hratt breytingarnar dynja á okkur. Á meðan maður skreppur út í bakari hefur heimurinn breytt sér þegar maður kemur aftur heim. Í þeim veruleika sem við ætlum að fjalla í dag eru tímarnir einnig skyndilega breyttir. Það sem var rétt fyrir 20 árum er rangt í dag. Það hefur orðið atvinnuháttabylting. Róbótar eru að taka við af innverkamönnum og svo bylting hellist yfir okkur nú stundir eins og monsúnregn sem ekkert fær stöðvað. Ósnert náttúra er verðmætari en rösku náttúra. Formúlan fyrir 100 árum eða svo var: stórfellt inngrip í náttúruna skapaði störf og tekjur fyrir samfélagið. Ósnert náttúra skapaði engin störf og engar tekjur fyrir samfélagið. Nú er þetta snúist við, eins og formúlan hafi verið margföldu með -1. Stórfellt inngrip í náttúruna skapar sárafá störf og sáralitla tekjur fyrir samfélagið. Ósnert náttúra skapar fjöldastarfa og samfélagslegar tekjur sem fjármagna heilsugæslu og skólakerfi. Þeir sem ekki átta sig á þessu mun verða sópað burt af straumþungu fljóti breyttra tíma. Virkjanir og stóriða get ekki lengur keppt við ósnerta náttúru í sköpun starfa og efnahagslegum ávinningi. Hraðinn í breytingum er gríðarlegur, tímarnir breytast hraðar en okkur óræði fyrir. Þeir sem sækja að náttúrunni til eigin hagsmuna eru röngu megin við nýjan tíma. Þeir munu drukkna í straumhörðu fljóti tímans sem nú hefur breytt farvegi sínum. Takk fyrir.
Þar höfum við það. Á ráðstefnunni verndarsvæði og þróun byggðar sagði Peter Crane frá þjóðgarði í Skotlandi sem verður að teljast óvenjulegur. Þar búa nefnilega 18.000 manns.
The Cairngorms was designated a national park in 2003, 15 years ago. And when it was created, people were involved from the start. So the boundary of the national park itself was part of the process of creating it. And the people of Scotland decided they wanted a national park that not only included natural heritage, special parts of nature, but they wanted a park that included people, because nature and people need to work together. So the boundary includes 18,500 people who live in and around a European protected area. And what we have tried to do over the last 15 years is develop a partnership plan, a plan to manage this area for people and nature that involves everyone. And every 5 years we develop a plan, and that involves working with the people to see what's in that plan and working with the partners. And the current plan has 49 different partners supporting that plan. And that's really important in the Cairngorms because I work for the Park Authority and we own none of the land. 75% of the land is in private ownership, 15% is owned by NGOs, by charitable organisations, and 10% is in public ownership. None by my organisation. So if we want to make this a special place for people and nature, we have to work together. And the reasons why we want to make it special for people and nature is 25% of the UK's rare and endangered species live in the Cairngorms National Park. And we don't want to protect that, we want to see those species not be endangered. We want to see them living in that place in a very, very comfortable lifestyle. But also, people are important because nearly half of the economy of the area is around visitors. And we want to see visitors coming and enjoying the Cairngorms in a responsible way. That is what we have been trying to do for the last 15 years. We've seen our visitor numbers increase from 1.4 million visitors when we started 15 years ago to 1.8 million, a 25% increase. And that's sustainable. We're doing a lot of work with communities to make the visitor experience better. We've done a lot of work on local path networks. It may be a surprise, but most of our visitors want to go for a short walk where they enjoy the natural heritage, where they enjoy the forests and see the mountains. And that's the work we've been doing to encourage that responsible experience from visitors. We think the designation National Park is an international attractor. Over 200 countries have national parks. People see that as the best place to go if they want to experience nature and countryside. It would be lovely for me to say that all landowners wanted to participate. The truth is that this is a slow process, and in 15 years I have seen changes. We interviewed with a land manager for our Europark sustainable tourism strategy, and he was being interviewed as part of that process, and he was really quite negative about the national park. And then the interviewer said, "But would you rather be in or out?" And he said, "I'd rather be in." I was going to very proudly say it's the biggest national park in Britain. It's 6% of mainland Scotland. And then yesterday I found out it's quite small by Icelandic standards. But it is 4,500 square kilometres. We can be the planning authority. If the planning application is significant, we can be the planning authority. So if you want to build a garage, we are not the people to do. If you want to put 30 new houses, we are the people who decide on the planning. And under a new piece of legislation, well, new, 15 years old, outdoor access in Scotland, everyone has a right to responsible outdoor access. We are the access authority. So we have two statutory roles. Everything else is in partnership.
En hvernig var farið að því að skapa nýjan þjóðgarð á svæði þar sem fyrir voru þúsundir íbúa, þorp, landeigendur og fjöldi fyrirtækja?
15 years ago, we had a new designation, a new national park, a place where people had lived for years before it was national park. We had to work out, and lots of bodies managing it, splitting it up and cutting it. How did we bring that all together? We talked with people. No, we listened to people. We listened to people, and we keep listening to people. We listen to local communities. We listen to groups of interest. We listen to outdoor enthusiasts, natural heritage enthusiasts, and we listen. And every 5 years, we create a plan for this area, a plan to improve things. 3 big areas in the current partnership plan. Conservation, a special place for people and nature. We can't do one without the other. And we want to see our natural and cultural heritage improved, enhanced. We don't see it staying the same. We don't want to keep it. We want to improve it. And what do visitors want? Visitors want a quality experience. That doesn't mean expensive. That means quality. And I'll come. So, if you want a meal, you may not want to pay a lot for it, but you still want a good meal. They want it to be green. They don't want that meal coming from South America. They want it coming locally if possible.
En hvernig tókst svo til í Skotlandi að láta dæmið ganga upp?
So, 15 years ago, new line on the map, new area. How did we make it work? We worked with people to develop a brand. And these were some of the ideas that came up, and lots of people like these. It's a mountainous area. Let's have some mountains in it. The top one, I think, was meant to be modern mountains. This piece of work was not easy because people knew what they wanted, even though they weren't designers, but it was really important we worked with the communities. And I think, very interestingly, a mountainous national park, we came up with a brand that was about nature. So one of the first pieces of work we did was to create an identity. So we used the brand. The top 2 granite markers, the 29 road entrances to the national park have one of those granite markers. That granite, 2 side stories here. That granite came from Balmoral Estate. The Queen sold us that granite at a very good price. It took me 6 months with Scottish Government to explain why we weren't buying cheap granite from India or China. Because it was going to be half the price. It took me 6 months. We have also worked with a range of partners. So here we have Historic Scotland, we have a private ski organisation, the bottom picture with the big sculpture on is Cairngorm Mountain Forestry Commission, to try and encourage them to see that their visitor experience is within the national park. We were very fortunate that the tourism businesses got together. Now, I could pretend it's all the tourism businesses. This is an organisation that tourism businesses need to pay to join, so it's not everybody, but they are, I think, over 300 members across the national park. They are the biggest single organisation, and the Cairngorm's Business Partnership made that first video that we saw. And they are using the national park brand as if it is theirs, because it is. And you can pick up a visitor leaflet and you wouldn't know who made it, because it's about the national park. The only way you'd tell is if it's got advertising in, it's not us, because of the way we are set up. And we also allow individual businesses to use the brand. So you can buy a beer, a very nice beer made in the national park. You can go on an outdoor event that's in the national park.
Eftir hlé ætlum við að heyra frá fleiri dæmum erlendis frá samspil verndarsvæða og þróun byggðar.
Límtré Vírnet hefur árabil hannað og selt húsnæði af öllum stærðum og gerðum eða allt frá litlum iðnaðarhúsnæðum upp í stærri og flóknari byggingar á borð við flugskýli, knatthús, verslunarhúsnæði og fleira. Límtré Vírnet. Við hjálpum þér að byggja, breyta og bæta.
Nýr Galaxy Note 9 öflugri en þú þarft. Hver þarf terabæti af geymsluplássi? Og hraðinn maður, hann fyrir mikilvægur hluti. Og hraðinn skiptir bara máli ef þú varst að fá skrána senda. Og dyrnar að lokast. Koma svo. Komið. Galaxy Note 9 öflugri en þú þarft. Þangað til þú þarft.
Þegar huga þarf að parketti við góðu kostur. Þegar saman koma vönduð efni, vönduð vinnubrögð og hágæða tækjakostur árangurinn alltaf eins og bestur á kosið. Þú nærð okkur í síma 892 8862 eða með tölvupóstfanginu pm@pm.is. Parkettmeistarinn pm.is.
Að bena þvagleikavörurnar í rekstrarlandi samþykktar af Sjúkratryggingum Íslands og Ríkiskaupum. Rekstrarland Vatnagörðum. Vottaðir hágæða varahlutir í flestar gerðir bifreiða. Bílanust. Nýja hauslínan komin, mjúk og hlý 100% merino ull, fjallakofinn.
Í Veröld, húsi Vigdísar Finnbogadóttur, höldum við áfram að fjalla ráðstefnu verndarsvæði og þróun byggðar. Á Vega-eyjaklasanum í Noregi var samfélagið við það að deyja út, en íbúarnir ákveða að snúa vörn í sókn Þeir sóttu að komast á heimsminjaskrá UNESCO.
Vega startet en prosess for å bli verdensarvområde rundt 2000. Vi så verdensarvstatusen som en mulighet til å ta vare på tradisjoner, på landskap, men også til å skape nye aktiviteter og jobbe. Som mange små lokalsamfunn i Norge og resten av verden, så opplever vi at ungdom flytter ut, og de ser ikke så mange muligheter lokalt. Og vi tenkte at med å få verdensarvstatus på vårt område, så vil vi kunne både ta vare på området, men også gi de oppvoksende generasjoner nye muligheter. Både innen kompetansearbeidsplasser og innen å skape egen virksomhet. Så det var vårt utgangspunkt for å begynne å arbeide med verdensarv. Og i 2004 så ble Vegaøyene skrevet inn som det første kulturlandskapsområdet i Norge. Og det jo for den måten folk har levd der, det samspillet mellom menneske og natur, som egentlig felles for Island og kysten av Norge også, at man har levd som fiskere og bønder. Og så har jo Vegaøyene og Island også en felles tradisjon med ærfugldrift. Og ærfugldriften, eller ærfugletradisjonen, en veldig viktig del av vår verdensarv. Så det har også vært bygd videre på nå i ettertid, at man etablerer ny virksomhet. Man har fått opp de gamle dunværene igjen, og man lager dunprodukter og dunopplevelser. Vi har ca. 4000 besøkende før vi fikk verdensarvstatus, og nå har vi 40 000, så det en tidobling. Og vi ser også at de gamle stedene, de gamle øyene som folk bodde før, at hus blir satt i stand, og at man tar opp ærfugletradisjon, og at man arbeider med å ta vare på kulturlandskapet, man har dyr på beite. Så da ser vi også med, vi har 2 ganske store butikker, vi har ganske god kommunikasjon til fastlandet, og det sånn som en følge av at vi har fått en økning i antall besøkende.
Í fyrirlestri sínum útlistaði Rita Jóhannsson nánar hvernig það að vera með lifandi samfélag á heimsminjaskrá UNESCO.
An island with just 1,220 inhabitants. Most people work as farmers, or they work in oil industry, or they work in service sector. But we see that we have small-scale tourism plays a more and more important role. And I think perhaps I've been a couple of times earlier to Iceland, and I visited small places here on Iceland. And I think perhaps we have much in common with those small places, like Stykkishólmur, where I've been sometimes, and I've also been in the north in Husavik and around. And I think perhaps Breiðafjörður and Vega archipelago looks a bit the same. We have 6,500 islands and skerries in our area. In earlier times, about 80 of those islands were inhabited. Now they are used during the spring and summer season, where you see the island in the front here, that is the biggest down island. We call people living on those islands during the down season bird tenders, while you call you're either farmers. That's the expression you use here. When Vega was inscribed on the World Heritage List in 2004, it was as a cultural landscape. And it's actually the way people have lived in an interplay with the nature, very much like people have lived here on Iceland as fishermen and farmers, and they have maintained this sustainable living and interplay in a remote area far out in the sea, called inhospitable of UNESCO when it was inscribed. But one of the most important part of this life was the down harvesting. It was the way that the women got an income to the family. The men were fishermen out north on Lofoten and Finnmark, while the women were at home and taking care of the animals and the family, and they got money by selling down, eider down. So that's why also the World Heritage status is a contribution made by women to the down process.
Og það fer ekkert á milli mála að þessi gagnsókn íbúana á vegaeyjaklassunum skipti sköpum fyrir samfélagið.
When we started the process about 2000, the islands were very different from now. It was the houses were not restored, the people didn't stay out there, and there were very few left that kept up the tradition with eider. So that was a very important part of why we started the process to get the World Heritage status. We saw that an old tradition, a more than 1,000 years old tradition, was it was almost gone, and there were no one there to continue the tradition. And as perhaps I think here and many places around the world, in small places, young people leave because they don't, there aren't jobs and they don't see any future in small places. So we also thought that World Heritage status could give new opportunities for younger generations to stay there. And I think we would have failed completely if we have started a top-down process and coming to tell the landowners what we would think they should do. And we think that in a equal cooperation, you also get promoting of value creation and new jobs. People get creative when you have a good cooperation.
Á Englandi búum 55 milljónir manna á svæði sem aðeins 30% stærra en Ísland. Til að njóta náttúrunnar þarf að stilla saman marga strengi. Það á við Forest of Bowland verndarsvæðið í norðurhluta landsins. Samstarf og samvinna lykilorð til að skapa þar sannkalla náttúruparadís.
The Forest of Bowland area outstanding natural beauty is 800 square kilometres of moorland fells and pastoral farmland. There are, within the Upland Experience network, which is a network of tourism businesses working collaboratively and cooperatively, there are 120 members across the area and from just outside the boundary as well. So we include the businesses who are just outside the boundary because they're the ones who are most involved, where there are larger centres of population. So this morning at the conference, I talked about the work of the Forest of Bowland Area of Outstanding Natural Beauty partnership, and about how we've been working particularly in partnership with communities and local businesses about how to develop sustainable tourism within a protected area. So that's developing it from a relatively low base, but also with the aims of being able to support the local economy, but without damaging the special landscape in which it's developing. People come to the Forest of Bowland to enjoy the peace and the solitude and the general sort of the peace and solitude which in some areas within a busy country like England or other parts of the United Kingdom, that's increasingly difficult to find that solitude and that peace and quiet and tranquility. All of the land is owned privately by individuals. In one case, the Queen of Great Britain is an owner of some of the land. There's also a water utility company now privatised, which is an owner of a large part of the Forest of Bowland. So we don't own any land, so we have to work in partnership with those landowners and obviously with the communities and businesses as I mentioned.
Í fyrirlestri sínum fór Elliot Lorimer nánar yfir það hvernig þarf að halda utan alla þræði.
The AONB is relatively close to large urban areas. We're 1 hour's drive north of Manchester and a similar drive time from large cities such as Leeds and Bradford in West Yorkshire. So we think there's probably about 2 million people within 1 hour's travel time from the AONB, and approximately 17,000 people live within the boundary. So we consider that as being quite as sparsely populated within the northwest of England, but you probably would consider that as quite well populated. The management of the partnership is guided by a wide range of organisations and sectors, and the AONB management plan that we have provides the partnership with vision and outlines the work to achieve that vision. So the government at the time decided to set up what was termed the Upland Experiment. It sounds rather strange term to use. Sounds very top-down, but actually in reality when it happened it was a much more involved local initiative. So it was looking at an integrated approach to improving farm environment and supporting the rural economy. So it supported diversification into other markets, including farm tourism. So the development of on-farm accommodation, farm shops, cafes and small-scale attractions. But one of the things that we recognised as a team was that those businesses that set themselves up, whether it was a farm, B&B, accommodation, they would often sell themselves as being close to the Yorkshire Dales National Park in the Lake District, and sadly made no mention of the special landscape in which they were actually located. And so we felt, and the partnership felt, that we needed to address that. So this project, the Sustainable Bowling Project, was about promoting those sustainable activities, generally what we term quiet enjoyment, walking, cycling, horse riding and bird watching, those sorts of activities. Create that consistent message, whether that's the businesses themselves starting to adopt that language and use the same language that really helps to galvanise and bind the sort of promotion of the area. Within England, we consider this wild and open. You can walk for a day in Bowland and see very few people at all, which is very rare when you're within, as I say, an hour's travel time from large cities in northern England. So it's still it's something that we very much treasure in the area, and the people who visit treasure that, and I think that's a very strong part of our sense of place that we try to keep a hold of. Delicious food and drink is really a part of the fabric of the Bowland landscape, and we are blessed with fine local producers and products, and that includes cheese, meats, beer. Interestingly, recently there's been the creation of what's called Bowland Brewery, and then has grown into a quite relatively locally large brand, and they sell their beer and call it ales of outstanding natural beauty. So they've actually taken our brand and changed it slightly and used it for their benefit. We'd like to work with them and see if they can help us out as well, because they're obviously using our landscape and using our logo to create that value. The AONB team has focused particularly on 2 key elements: the tourism network, and that's where we see this active ingredient behind the Bowland Experience Network, absolutely fundamental to the work, the work that I'm describing today. And then also obviously the visitors themselves, we focus on those.
Á ráðstefnu verndarsvæði og þróun byggðar ávarpaði Guðmundur Ingi Guðbrandsson umhverfisráðherra gesti fundarins. Í ræðu sinni ræddi hann meðal annars áherslu á þær áskoranir sem blasa við í umhverfisvernd á Íslandi.
There are many challenges for the future, especially in relation to governance and expansion of protected areas, with the competing interest of tourism and the energy sector creating many tensions. I would like to highlight the following types of pertinent administrative and socio-economic challenges. Nature-based tourism has been growing rapidly in Iceland, and the increase and its potential impacts are a major challenge to the protected area estate and the maintenance of Iceland's natural assets. Many protected areas and popular tourist destinations are now under serious threat of degradation, and there is a further risk that the quality of the visitors' experience and enjoyment will diminish. Some of the sites might already be overwhelmed during peak days with individual visitors and packaged tours. However, if effectively planned, visitor management might create a great opportunity as experience of a protected area is now becoming a significant component of visitors' experience. This calls for far greater coordinated action in collaboration with local communities by conservation and tourism interests. Tourism is a vital industry for the Icelandic economy, and the government is aware of the impact that the increased tourism can have on our natural environment, as well as society, of course. It is of great importance to secure the distribution of tourist destinations in the country, taking into consideration nature conservation and the protective and needs of local communities. It is also of great importance to analyze the carrying capacity of areas as well as people. To obtain that, the government has published a new strategy in construction of and strengthening the needed infrastructure and ranger services, making the areas better accessible and enjoyable for visitors, and at the same time safeguard the natural environment. Based on this new strategy, fortunately, we have been able to secure large increase in governmental funding for the needed conservation and visitor management infrastructure and ranger services in protected areas. So if I can be proud of anything during the 5 months that I've been in office, then that is to bring a little more money into this sector. It is also obvious that Iceland can draw lessons in this field from many other parts of the world, such as regulation of numbers, increased professional ranger presence, limiting and regulating visitor access in the most fragile parts, and improved footpath strategy and management. Therefore, a meeting like this is important in order to share information and learn from one another.
Eftir hlé ætlum við að heyra frá fleiri dæmum erlendis frá samspil verndarsvæða og þróun byggðar.
Oh, we get what we deserve. And where down we go, oh, 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 where down we go, oh, 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 so where down we go, oh, 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 way down we go.
Nútímaleg skrifstofurými og fundaraðstaða sér sniðin að þínum þörfum hvar sem þú kannt að þurfa á því að halda. Við bjóðum upp á fullbúnar skrifstofur í lengri eða skemmri tíma og það allt innifalið. Lounge, háhraða internettenging, skrifstofuhúsgögn, móttaka. Þú þarf bara að mæta og byrja. Regis á 6 stöðum á Íslandi, 900 borgum í 120 löndum. Hvar hentar þér að starfa í dag? Regis.is.
Hugsaðu heilsuna, heitir pottar.is, Höfðabakka 1 við Gullinbrú.
Partasölur.is, allar helstu bílapartasölur landsins á einum stað. Ekkert einnota plast í september. Fróðleikur og ráð á plastlausseptember.is. Láttu aðalverkstæðið sjá bílinn þinn. Fáðu betri þjónustu, fáðu betra verð. Aðalverkstæðið, Malarhöfða 2, sími 577 4004. Bingo í Vinabæ. Öll mánudags- og fimmtudagskvöld. Heildarupphæð vinninga yfir 400.000 krónur á kvöldi.
Sjálfsagt hafa allir heyrt talað heimsminjaskrá UNESCO, menningarmálastofnunar Sameinuðu þjóðanna. Hér á Íslandi höfum við 2 slík svæði sem falla undir heimsminjaskrána, Surtsey og Þingvalla þjóðgarð. En það hafa sjálfsagt færri heyrt talað lífheima UNESCO, þótt þau svæði séu reyndar miklu fleiri heldur en þau sem eru á heimsminjaskrá. Á ráðstefnu verndarsvæði og þróun byggðar fjallaði fulltrúi UNESCO skilgreininguna á lífheimum og benti Íslendingum á að þeir hefðu mörg svæði sem getur fallið undir þá skilgreiningu.
The backbone of the Biosphere program is the World Network of Biosphere Reserves. There are right now 669 biosphere reserves in 120 countries of the world, including 20 transboundary biosphere reserves. Biosphere reserves, it's a very important tool to implement the Sustainable Development Goals 2030, and it's also what we tend to call laboratories for sustainable development that really try to bring together nature conservation and sustainable development in a concrete area designated by a country. So, many countries of the world have accepted this, 120 countries out of 195 countries, member states that we have in UNESCO. So far, Iceland has not designated a biosphere reserve, but it seems to be very important here in the country to work on a similar approach because the changes and the challenges the country and also the nature and the society is facing is very much in line with the possibility of establishing a biosphere reserve. So it could be very useful if the country decides so. For the future, of course, this has a certain procedure to follow. What we from our side can offer is to support the process, to see how we can, let's say, give a little support to the establishment via basically with logistics or with consultancy. This could be our role. Also, quite important is to have Iceland collaborating in regional and sub-regional networks, such as NordMap. And Iceland could become, for example, something like a hub for environment in the Nordic countries. When I say Nordic countries, this is Canada, Greenland, Denmark, Norway, Finland, Sweden, and the Russian Federation. Iceland is located right in the middle, so there is a good potential, I think, to do so.
Á ráðstefnunni undirstrikaði Mikael að stofnun lífheima UNESCO þyrfti alltaf að vera að frumkvæði heimamanna.
UNESCO is the only UN agency that designates sites, World Heritage Sites, Biosphere Reserve, geoparks. We hold also the Ramsar Convention, although it's implemented by the Ramsar Secretariat in Gland. But so we encourage, of course, the governments and local communities really to have what we call conservation and sustainable use of natural resources. But like an iceberg, there is a visible part and a less visible part. So 28% of all these sites are natural World Heritage sites, very visible, outstanding protection of outstanding value. 70% of these sites are the biosphere reserves. You will hear more from me this time. And for the time being, only 2% are geoparks, but you have 2 in Iceland, and they are developing pretty well. What is the Man in the Biosphere program? It is an intergovernmental program, scientific program, really tries to see how to improve the relationship between people and the environment, between nature and human beings. One very strong tool of it is the World Network of Biosphere Reserves, and I will come later to it explaining it a little bit more, because it is useful to communicate the experiences and lessons learned. What is a biosphere reserve? We heard about parks, we heard about World Heritage sites, but biosphere reserves is something different. It is not an area with outstanding universal value. It's a sort of model site. It's a site that has some compulsory, let's say, characteristics. The first one is, you see this model here, I tend to call it the fried egg, because it looks like it's a model, so you will hardly never find it in reality. It's a core area, protected area by national law. UNESCO cannot protect areas. This is not our mandate. We are a UN agency, so we are relying on the protection that is done by the country authorities. This core area is surrounded by a buffer zone, surrounded by a transition or development area where the people live. So you have in the central area, and there can be many areas, cluster for example, really conservation, protection of ecosystem of species. The buffer zone is basically designated towards the conservation, but it has allowed compatible use with ecological practices. And the transition area or development area is really where the communities live, where you try to get ecologically sustainable economic and human activities, where you have a sort of also laboratories for sustainable development. So this is a biosphere reserve. So there are no biosphere reserve where there are no people living. This is very different to parks or to World Heritage Sites. It may happen that a World Heritage Site is the core area of a biosphere reserve, because these models are very complementary. But just to make it very clear what it is and also what it is not. Sweden has developed a full program and is reporting to us how these Swedish biosphere reserves implement the 2030 agenda. I would not like to go into details how they're doing it, but you see on the little map the sites that Sweden has established as biosphere reserve. And I would like to give you just this as a model, if you would like to use this for further use here in the country. Just what they have done, for example, 200 kilometers of trails for hiking and biking and horseback riding in the Lake Vänern Archipelago Biosphere Reserve, or formerly overgrown meadows has been transformed to really something, to an open meadow that is now really ecologically viable. So I think these are quite some good examples that can be easily replicated. We heard about something logos and identity. I think it's quite very important. We had some good examples how you came to your logo this morning. You saw the development. So this is, I would like to give you a sort of overview, what we have right now on logos all over the place. Because when we are talking about logos on, let's say, research projects or ideas, then you can use the UNESCO logo. But when we are coming to products, to goods, normally you're not allowed to put the UNESCO logo on it. So you must have your own identity, thanks, of the own area, of the own size. So here you see a large variety of logos that we have here. And it gives you also always the origin, how it started. We had a good example this morning, but there are many others out there. Then, of course, the products. Here you have something on Switzerland, on Lebanon, Spain. There's also Spain, Korea, and Mexico. We have a clear proof that the value of the products, because they are controlled, has increased. The income has increased. It is really something that you produce maybe less, but you produce with better quality and with better price.
Þúsundir þjóðgarða og verndarsvæði í Evrópu eru aðilar að samtökunum Europark, þar á meðal Umhverfisstofnun og Vatnajökuls þjóðgarðar. Europark heldur utan sameiginlega hagsmuni og stuðlar að gagnkvæmri upplýsingagjöf. Heyrum hvað fulltrúi Europark hafði samstarfið að segja.
Well, fundamentally, we are both the representative body of protected areas of Europe, but also the biggest network. So in terms of representing the interests of protected areas, we are really working to lobby and to really proclaim again the values and benefits that protected areas give to society. So in terms of lobbying, we are working very much with European and international institutes to really show the importance of protected areas. But on a networking level, of course, it's really important that through international cooperation that we bring our members together who've got common challenges to look to develop new solutions to those challenges. And it's through working together, through networking, developing new tools and programs to help support the work of those parks and protected areas. So we're very much about international cooperation in order to protect nature through the support and work of protected areas. Literally, there are thousands of protected areas inside our network, so I don't have the number in its entirety. But one of the programs that our members develop and that Europark is particularly notable for is the Charter for Sustainable Tourism in Protected Areas. And that was a response to a difficulty that was perceived in the 1990s about visitation to protected areas. And we developed this methodology, this tool that created a new partnership between tourism businesses and parks. And for that, I do have much more evaluated numbers. We now have 164 awarded sustainable destinations across Europe in 20 countries. There are, in Spain alone, 400 and more than 400 tourism partners, tourism business partners, working with the parks in Spain, which is generating over 1,500 individual actions by those businesses to help improve the conservation work of those parks. So really, that partnership really has been forged between the business world and the protected area world, which I think we pretty much take for granted these days. But back in the 90s, this was quite radical thinking.
Við eigum eitt sameiginlegt tungumál og það tungumál verndarsvæða. Þetta var megin erindið í fyrirlestri Karol Ritzi, fulltrúa Europark, á ráðstefnu verndarsvæði og þróun byggðar.
I'm using the term protected areas because it saves me also saying a big long list of national parks, regional parks, nature parks, biosphere reserves, World Heritage Sites, Ramsar sites, geoparks, and so on. So I'm using the term protected areas as a collective term for all of those. All of those types of parks are members of our organisation. There are some 300 plus national parks in Europe. 70% of them are members of the Europark Federation. There are some 900 plus nature regional parks in Europe, and almost all of those are, through their national associations, members of the Europark Federation. Most of the national agencies of Europe are members of the Europark Federation, and I'm delighted that the Icelandic Environment Agency are part of our members, as well as Vatnajökull National Park, too. Very glad to have you amongst us. And there are many NGOs also who are members of our federation because they have a responsibility for or an interest in the management of protected areas. So we're less interested in who you are, we're more interested in what you do, because that's where the challenges are, and that's the common language that we all speak, the language of parks. And we develop the programmes and we make the tools to help support the work of protected areas. We don't just go use somebody else's tool, we go make the tool actually that many other organisations end up using, the tools that we've built. And that's all there to help to support the work of protected areas so that we can conserve our natural and cultural heritage. We fundamentally do that through networking. You might recognise this place too, because obviously we promote the work of our members, so I'm sure you all know where that is. So we do that through networking, through international cooperation, and through personal contact. Of course we use webinars, of course we use e-platforms and all the other things, but you know what? There's nothing better than one peer speaking to another and learning from each other. We have commissions and working groups, and of course sections. And Iceland is part of the Nordic-Baltic section of our organisation, and I very much encourage you to exchange with your neighbours and colleagues across the Nordic-Baltic region. But in recent times, the natural heritage community has been asked to put more of an economic value on that nature. And that's been a bit of a challenge for us. I think we're honest enough to admit. But Any challenge to Europark members, I think, is one that is embraced, and I think our colleagues in Finland in particular have really embraced that, and really, I'll come to Wales in a minute, and they've really looked at Finland has really looked at the economic value of a national park, and I think you'll be speaking about that just in a few minutes later. But they're able to summarise that for every euro that's invested in a national park or in a protected area, 10 euros are given back in return to the economic benefit of that local area or that region or that community. I'm going to take that down to an even smaller scale, to the island of Mull, a population of 2,500 people. And the reintroduction of sea eagles, thank you Nordic countries for giving us a loan of them, has brought in £2 million into that small rural island. That's keeping people in jobs. That's keeping the post office open. It's keeping the shops open, the petrol station open, the school open. It's maintaining a living landscape.
Lokaorðin á ráðstefnunni átti finnskur ungur fræðimaður sem hefur rannsakað efnahagsleg áhrif af Snæfellsnes þjóðgarði. Niðurstöður hans eru harla afgerandi. Þjóðgarður góður business.
I looked into the economic impact of the national parks here in Iceland, and I did my study on Snæfellsjökull National Park, kind of as a pilot to see if this methodology would work in Iceland. And essentially, like if I just kind of briefly go over the general results, there seems to be like an immense value in the nature-based tourism and recreation in the national parks here. The total economic impact of Snæfellsjökull National Park in 1 year in the study period was mid-2016 to mid-2017. In the study was 3.9 billion krona altogether, and about half of that the tourists, the visitors actually spent on the Snæfellsnes Peninsula. So it had like about on average 45% of that went actually into the local area. And we still need to do a little bit of research looking into what are the exact employment effects, but like the methodology that I employed like indicated that it has kind of an impact of about 700 jobs, like both full-time and part-time in Iceland, like these visitors like visiting the national park and everything, like, you know, along that value path. So that was quite, you know, significant findings, like showing that nature-based tourism has a huge impact. And if I compare that to the budget of the national park, the annual budget of the park is about 70 million Icelandic krona. So you're actually looking at kind of a return of investment ratio of 58-1. It's like if the state, for example, you know, invests 1 krona into the national park management annually, it comes back 58 times. And if you take out all the secondary impacts, you'll just look at the direct consumption, that's still over 40 times, like to 1 krona, the impact there. So that was quite a finding, because my initial impetus this study was a similar study that the Finnish national parks do, actually every 5 years in all the national parks. And in Finland they found out that €1 spent in the national parks brought 10 back. And this was already like, you know, significant finding in Finland, and here for the case of Snæfellsjökull that seemed to be almost like 5 times the impact there. It kind of looks at all the visitor spending. So what people are spending on tours, accommodation, food in restaurants, cafes, groceries, transport, souvenirs, kind of everything that the visitors spent the money on. I actually kind of gathered that data myself by doing surveys to about 500 people last year in the national park. So that's kind of, it's actually relatively simple. It's just money that people spent, and then we look how that money kind of flows in the local economy. You know, of course, if you want to develop that, especially maybe, you know, if you want to look at the local communities, you maybe want to try to move the weight from the money that people spend here in the capital region doing like, you know, 1 day zip in, zip out tour to the Snæfellsjökull National Park, to how could they stay longer in the Snæfellsnes Peninsula, so that they are spending more money, you know, around the national park, because that kind of has a lot more better sustainability angles to it. It contributes more to the people, the local people there. It allows local people to be employed. But I also believe that this kind of like slow tourism or slow travel around the national park also in the end actually gives better visitor experiences. And then also maybe, pulls a little bit of the tourism flow away from the overly popular destinations at the moment.
Í fyrirlestri sínum bað Jukka Siltanen gestum að vega meta þau efnahagslegu áhrif sem eftirsóknarverð náttúra getur haft.
So let's get started. Take a few seconds to look at this picture here and think what kind of values it, stirs in you. It's from one of my field trips to the park, collecting data. So maybe, you see some recreational value. You would like to go hiking there. Some of you may see aesthetic beauty. Some geologists, I don't know why, they might see some scientific value here in the geology. Some people might see existential value. We have a beautiful glacier there. We want to keep it for the future generations, and so on. So many different kinds of values. Not all so easy to kind of put on the same plate, to say. If you look at this photo, what kind of values do you see here? Energy, for sure. So there's certainly economic benefit there.
Social benefit, all the water from hot water.
Yes, exactly. Protection from the elements. Yeah. Also maybe scientific value. Like a lot of scientific studies have been made related to, when you drill deep down what you find there. Maybe national security value. So there's a lot of different kinds of values. But how do you compare these? That's kind of been the tricky part, I think, here in Iceland already for some time. And in my study, I looked at the economic value. So I'm kind of like willing to say that there is one way to put these two in a balance. You probably know it, starts with an M, ends with a Y. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today, money. Maybe the local communities can look whether there is more local economic impact or whether there is more local jobs in nature-based tourism and conservation compared to, energy utilization. This is how much money they spend. About $200 or 20,000 krona in the summer per person per night, and about 26,000 in the winter, or $250, which is quite a lot comparing to the numbers, Carol, that you had on your slides. You had, I think, around 70 pounds or something like that. 45% of this landed in the Snæfellsnes Peninsula. That was quite a lot, actually.
Þetta var sitthvað það helsta sem kom fram á ráðstefnu verndarsvæði og þróun byggðar hér í Veröld, húsi Vigdísar Finnbogadóttur á dögunum. Við látum hér staðar numið, vonandi hafið þið notið vel. Góðar stundir.